Yeah, let's start. Preparation for PHP 9. We already started the discussion around it. We have no idea what's going to be in PHP 9. What we basically know is things that are not going to be in PHP 9. And that's exactly what we're going to discover today. So you learn about it, and you remove that from your code, and you'll be fine. Okay? So what do we have for the next hour? We're going to list a good number of PHP features that are currently being deprecated. We're also going to cover the different ways they are deprecated. And believe me, there's a good number of them. So you're going to discover how they kind of, died discreetly or not, sometimes a bit more spectacularly. We'll also discover or discuss a number of situations why they are going away, because sometimes, there's a bit of misunderstanding on why this was there and we don't have it anymore. Why is it the future? So we'll discuss that, and you'll be ready to answer that to, other developers. And of course, the most important is that you can prepare for it, because even though next one is going to be 8.6, and we might have lots of those before PHP 9, any update you do on your code that removes those deprecations is usually going to have a modernization and a great benefit on your code, even right now. So everything that's deprecated in 8.4 and you're using it on 8.1, well, that's going to improve your code. So just for that, that's good. Also, that's going to reduce the amount of log in your infrastructure, and those guys are going to be very happy about it. So as I said, I have no idea what's going to be there. So far, we have 6 features that are open, and none of them are closed. So neither of us know what's going to happen. On the other hand, what I know is the number of error messages that are tagged as deprecated per PHP version. And as you can see, it's pretty regular. I did a presentation in March, and I was forecasting 340, and this is 325. I don't know if it's a tradition or if it's in the policy, but now by the early June, we get a traditional deprecation RFC, which is a potpourri of everything that everyone wants to go away. And then there is a lot of discussions, votes. Some go away, some stay, and then they are included in the engine. So at least this is something you can prepare for. 8.6, again, by June, go to wiki.php.net and find the deprecation RFC. You're going to learn something about things that disappear. And there's also something that I enjoy in that schema, in that graph, which is that imagine that we start a new version where obviously we got rid of all the deprecations from PHP 7. Right off the bat, boom, 60 deprecations. This is the moment where we want things to be out of the way, right? And I think I've already discussed with people from the foundation, and they kind of expect PHP 9 to have the same thing. We're going to start with a bunch of deprecation, even with a major release. One of them being some of the deprecation might actually outlive the next version. They will still be there to give people more time to actually tackle the problem. The other one is that some of those deprecations are, triggering the next one. So once you're done with deprecating something, you can clean the code, and now you can do another one. But you have to first get rid of the previous one. So maybe we'll see a few examples that are, already lingering in the code. But yeah, that's the evolution, and hopefully we're going to run into PHP 9 soon for that. Now, and before we start into detailing a good number of them, I want you to consider what it means to remove something from the code. My favorite update is when a feature is turned into a syntax error. It was there, it was working, now it's in syntax error. Well, this is pretty much what happens when something is not supported anymore, right? It's not there, the engine says, I don't recognize anything like that, just write that different way, okay? The other options usually run around an error message saying, oh, that has been removed, but you have to consider what it means. It means that PHP still check your code, spot that there is an old feature, I don't know, something that was there since PHP 2, says, hey, look, I know this feature, it was removed, and then give you a message. So this is nice. It's also a lot of work for telling you you're doing a shitty job. So it's not always the case, although there are examples with the curly braces. Otherwise, other situation will just raise an exception so that at least you can catch it. Even though you decide to catch it and do nothing with it, now it's your choice. But at least you can do something about it. That would be the case, for example, of an empty array on Max. And I want you to keep that in mind when you're going to see the different features we see deprecated. What would be a good solution for that case? What would you expect the behavior of PHP to be when this is actually removed? In between, everything you've seen here is collected from static analysis experience. So I review lots and lots of PHP codes, and I try to see what's going to be ready or deprecated in next version. Try to apply at least a pattern to say, hey, I can industrialize the amount of situation I can look for. So this all comes from actual code that has been reviewed at some point. In particular, I want to another extracted information here that might be interested. I have a list of changed behavior, which is basically a removed feature, but even sneakier because it's still there, just not doing what you expect it to do. There's a good number of them. And the other one is the error messages. I will probably do my usual take on the new error messages for PHP 8.5 before we get the new version. So at least you can discover what PHP has in store for you when it actually moves to the next version. So let's go and see a few examples. Where are they? How do they look like? And also what kind of what kind of categories we have. And it's a bit difficult because there are deprecation all over the place in different extensions, different part of the code. So I tried to turn them into three categories. Remove structures which revolves around things that have a name in general, function, classes, things like that. Then other things that usually do not have a name until it's a deprecation and it needs a title to be spread around. Okay, so that would be a bit more around the modernization. And once you're very tired, we'll finish with the things that are really bizarre. That might not affect you, but it's fun to see that PHP has actually had that feature for such a long time, and you actually never knew about it. Generally speaking, there's, as we said, 300 of them. I don't expect you to remember all of them, of course. I also do not expect you to be bitten by all of them. I would say in general, 5 to 10% of them are going to bite you. So if you're not interested by specific feature or what is happening, you may be interested in the way it behaves and the way you can detect it, because that's also part of knowing PHP. Easy ones. Which are the first ones that are going to be removed, that you expect to be removed? Not you. Functions? Yeah, PHP is known for its huge amount of functions. There must be new ones and one that disappears, right? So here is a good number of them. None of them are being deprecated the same way. This is fun, right? First one, UTF-8 encode and UTF-8 decode. I think it's 8.3 that deprecate them. And those ones are belonging to, it's not exactly an extension, it's part of the core, but there's the string extension. It's string manipulation. So so far there was a way to convert string into UTF-8 directly in PHP core, and otherwise they are stored in the MB string on econf. So that's like 3 ways of doing things. And out of the 3 ways, of course, one of them is not maintained, and that's this one. So at the moment, probably it's better to do the migration to MB string and iconf. Up to you to do the choice. Usually there's 1 or the 2 library that is available, so just pick up the one you have. Nice part here is that you can spot that and decide which one you want to replace it with. Not sure that Rector has something for that, but now once it's spotted, you can easily convert them. ODBC, ODBC result all. This is really nice. Who's using ODBC? Good, no one anymore. And this one in particular is feeling very much PHP 3 style because it would generate HTML code for you. I would bet HTML1 code. Again, it's not been updated for a while, but that's very old system. Well, beside the fact that no one uses ODBC anymore, but yeah, it was outputting something that's not done the same way anymore. So this one just plain goes away and will probably yield an undefined function at some point. LCG value, who's using that? Who's know what it is? I don't, you remember the acronym for LCG? Length something generator. It's congruence. Anyway, this is based. This is one of the underlying elements to do random numbers. So you have to link it to srand, rand, empty rand, and all those functions. Half of them have already been updated to the random extension. So it's an important part of PHP, in particular whenever we have to deal with cryptography, generating enough random values. It's not done by those functions anymore. They are an extension that's dedicated to that. And anytime you have to do cryptography, please use that. This one was broken in many ways. Not exactly know what it means. Anyway, just switch as a natural evolution to a random extension. That should be good enough. Others that goes away en masse, prefixes with mhash. I think there's like 5 or 6 functions. It's the whole extension that goes away. It's very old. It's not maintained anymore. And we have a replacement, which is mhash, but without the M. So you can spot them in general. It's just the whole extension going away. There might be others that are moved to Pickle or to Pi those days. They're still available. They're just one extra step whenever you want to install them. So keep using those, but mhash in particular is completely retired. No one is handling that. Beside prefix, discovered that from Volker this morning, there's also suffixes. And this one is a bit more vicious. You have ever seen those evolution from resources to objects? For example, if you used to, don't do that anymore, but if you used to open connections with FTP, or secure FTP for that matter, you would get a resource until PHP 7 something, and now you get an object. But when it's a resource, the object is outside, so you needed an extra function that would allow you to close it before going further. Okay, so we had a long list of functions that are something close that you would pair with the open one. So you open something, do some work on the remote server, and then at the end, close it. But since now we have an object, then the object has a destructor. When it's removed, everything goes away. You don't have to. Now the second layer here is an evolution in behavior. Okay, if you want to check the result, let's say FTP open, you used to check that with isResource. Now it's an object, so isResource is going to fail. It looks like you cannot connect to your remote system. Okay, so the evolution here includes also a change of behavior. Things that were working before are not working the same way. So be careful with that. There's more than the eye meet with this particular feature. Assert option. I like the assertions, really nice little feature if you want to pepper your code with little tests that gives you a heads up and before it's actually turned into a real problem. This one in particular, the feature is still here. It's just being cleaned and all the options are being moved inside PHP i9. For one good reason, that usually either you run it on and then you're in development or you're in production, but you don't, start half of your application, then decide that you want the assertions and then shut them down halfway later. So at that point, assert just goes away entirely or do nothing. Now, slight variation. First, it's really long to say, libxml disable entity loader. I don't know if anyone used this one. No, it's been already gutted since PHP 8. So this one in particular, when you're loading XML file, you've got those entities, starting with an ampersand, some letters, and you've got the column at the end. Okay. Now, if the parser does not find the definition for those entities as it goes, it will try to fetch them online, remotely. Of course, in terms of security, it's pretty bad. You're going to have suddenly your PHP that start asking, things remotely, and God forbid, you may get actually an XML injection. So this was already a security feature. You avoid loading by default unless you already know, and usually you download it and make it as a cache. Security aside, this function is available since, well, at least PHP 8, but it has done nothing at all. If you call it, it says, yeah, no problem. Do nothing. This is not going to be the only situation where the feature says, oh yeah, I'm still here, but no, I'm not doing it. Okay? So, well, you can remove it safely. At that point, it does nothing. It's probably not a big deal. But yeah, sometimes you've got the feature that's still there to avoid running into undefined function and breaking your code. The next one is not format supported, so that has been removed. And the last one is something that I added personally because I didn't remember when each was removed. Not that I use it, but it's been going away for so long that I thought maybe it's still there for compatibility reason. And it was removed before PHP 8, so that should not be in that slide. But sometimes, if you keep hearing it's going away, and yeah, you didn't pay attention, then maybe you don't know it's already away. Okay, so listen to it, but make sure that that the features are there or not. While we're there, if you are running into deprecated functions, I wanted to remind you of a small element. When we remove a function, of course, the function suddenly is available. In particular, you could imagine that it would be replaced by a polyfill. That's one of on the options, okay? If you want to keep a function, but not run into undefined behaviors, then, of course, polyfill can do the work, which means that if PHP remove it from internals, can be replaced by a custom implementation, either by someone you trust, or it could be used for security reasons, to take over some of your application. You still need to have someone who makes an injection in your application and then rename a native function of PHP to actually do the hack. And that feature, that is also a feature because I like to use it for tests, since function definition are first checked at the namespace level. So if you create a fprint inside a namespace, PHP will use it in priority over the global one. If it does not find it, then it will go to the global one, which is the default behavior. So be careful with that. The undefined functions is leaving a hole in terms of access to native functions. Now, next one, constants. Constants also can go away. And they also can go away in different ways. Strict will remind you something from the libxml one. It has been gutted. It just doesn't do anything. The constant itself is there. You can use it, you can call it, you can add it with something else if that makes sense to you. That's a pretty long integer for writing a literal value, but it works, except that it used to be connected to extra checks that PHP would run on your codes and tell you, yeah, you should probably not do that, or things like undefined variables. Nowadays, there is no extra check anymore. So if you configure it, PHP will just, it's there, but I'm not doing anything more. So it's getting useless. Gutted from the inside, no more features. We've already seen things about random constants. The next one is also not doing anything anymore. It will bail out and not run the feature anymore. It's an option. It will, I think, default back to the only one that it knows. The best here for you is to move to the extension that is doing better random values than this. Again, it's pretty easy. You can even do a grep on your code, select all those usage of the function and then of the constant, and use it again. Extension stands also to do that kind of evolution. Here I have a potpourri of MySQLi. Some of them just disappear. They're not available anymore. Not all of them are disappearing. Okay, so you need to get a list of the one you wanted to use, and then then start removing them. But most of the time they are not used often, so that should be simple enough and not bite you too often. But be careful with your extension in particular. You need to see them. They evolve just like PHP, and that's part of your environment. Finally, another behavior specific user error will stay. It will just yell a deprecation at you when you use it. So if you just echo it, yeah, it's fine. You're going to display it. If you use it with trigger error, that will be the moment where it tells you, don't do that. Now, there's no other usage of user error than giving it to a trigger error, except maybe if you want to do a switch in your error handler and actually behave according to the level of the error that was emitted. But basically, it will only tell you that at that level. Okay, so again, you see, even for constants, we have very different ways of things getting deprecated, from the level where nothing happens and you get undefined constants, probably a fatal error after that, to things that are still there and sneakily, once in a while, give you a log. Easy enough? Other things that can be deprecated? Classes? Ooh, that's scary. Now, the good thing is that we have absolutely no experience with deprecating anything that is looking like a class. So you're safe for that moment, except maybe for extensions if they rename things. PHP has no traits. It now has a few native enumerations, but again, there's like 2 of them, so none of them are yet deprecated. And classes and interfaces is working well. The only thing I might mention is that for the interfaces, for the serializable interface, the 2 methods _wake and _sleep are being deprecated. So the interface itself is still here. The methods will yield some message for you. Okay, so again, there's different layers. Be careful. This is 8.5, so don't rush and fix your code. What else am I missing in terms of name structure, which may have an impact on your code that could be deprecated? Variables? Yeah, that happens. In 8.5, we have 1 deprecated variable. The one that you get that holds the headers after you do a file get content, for example. PHP will create a new variable where it holds all the headers it gets from the remote destination. And this is now deprecated because there's a function for that. I didn't include it here, but that's an extra tidbit. So variables can be deprecated, function, classes, what else? Something that might be sneaky? Constants, yes. You were sleeping during the slides about constants. Thank you. Sorry? Operators, that's a good one. I have no experience with that. I don't think this would be the case. I would expect a change in behavior, like someone decide to drop the support for arrays with plus, or to add the behavior for minus. I don't know. Maybe we have to ask someone from the PHP Foundation about that. But oh yeah, so that counts as one, and it's also a slide after. So you're really listening to my slides in the wrong order, right? Are you using random extension or not? Or you're using LCG value? Don't do that. This is deprecated. The one that we are missing are the directives, which is even sneakier than whatever we've seen because they have a name. They will not appear in your code because obviously they are in the PHP INI. Okay, they might appear in your code if you decide to do iniset, iniget. But if you use iniget all, that's not going to happen. Okay. Also, usually they are tied to a feature, and we need to do a dereferencement and say, okay, if you're using filter default, it means that anytime you're using one of those filter underscore function, be careful because this might have an impact on you. Okay. But there, at that point, what happens is most of the time they have a specific name. So this is the filter extension. This is a session extension. This is core. Okay. Same for the other one, icon. So most of the time, you can rely on the name of the extension And then remember that, oh yeah, I know that I can do it or I'm using it, so I have to pay attention to those specific directives. Now, filter default, this is going to be really sneaky because this is the default behavior when you just call filter and don't mention anything more than just filter it according to the default. At that point, the problem is that the values that PHP gives as default in the PHP INI are difficult to have very well tuned. Okay, it's either too tight and then by default it's not going to filter the value correctly, or it's going to be too wide and then again it's going not to filter at all. The idea here is that this default will go away and then you're going to have to do it yourself and give it the value that you understand case by case. Okay, so here we're more like if you rely on filter functions, then check them because they may rely on this directive. Sessions. First session is nice to see them go away because unlike filter dot and assert dots, they don't have the prefix to understand which extensions they are related on. Okay, all of them are going away because the feature is also going away. And you're going to detect that you're still using these old directives because you will start your application and right off the bat, right after the first PHP tag, boom, error message going to be displayed. Okay, not in the code, this is just an example. But in the logs, it will say, hey, look, you've got an error on line 0. What, line 0? Yeah, if it's on line 0, probably it means that you're messing up something into your PHP INI. Okay? So use it as a hint. If your logs are full or errors on line 0, yeah, it's probably something wrong. Disable class going away. This one is for PHP 8.5 because most of the time, if you disable one of those classes, then you might end up with not running any PHP at all. The example from Volker this morning is disabling exception. Yeah, that's going to miss. So this one is going away. You can't do that. Anyway, it used to have a huge penalty in terms of performance, so not too many people would use that. Meaning that anytime there's a static call, including constants, anytime there's a new, PHP will check if there is one of the classes that is forbidden, and then maybe prevent you from doing it. So that happens a lot. That was pretty bad so far. So if you have, just leave it empty and be safe on PHP 8.5. The other one, maybe you have more clues on this one. Disable function, same problem. Anytime there's a function call, PHP will actually check if this is a load or not. And if you put like 3 of them, you're going to kill your PHP performance. Oh yeah, that was pretty bad. This is good for hosters. Anyone who's hosting. Well, there was an impact. There was a huge impact. Maybe it's better nowadays. I would expect that this is going to stay until all the, I don't know, shared hoster are still doing it. So that might take a bit longer than the classes, which obviously are a bit easier and less. But things like you don't want to send emails, you don't want them to use LDAP or SFTP or something like that, that usually ended up there. At least this one disable function will stay. Other things, assert. We've already seen the counterpart, assert options, the function going away. Well, obviously, all the related assert options are going to go also away. Okay. Does it mean that we don't have any directive anymore for assert? It already finished? No. Does it mean that we don't have any option at all for assertions? The main point of assertions is that you can disable them easily by just one directive, but if we remove all the directives, then what's left? What's left is that there is actually another directive that is controlling them, but they have another name. Yes, that was surprising. When writing that slide, that was like, yeah, where? No. So this one in particular, assert as a global feature is controlled by that, and everything else is gone nowadays. Also, important to know, iconv, we mentioned about encoding, the incoming encoding, the outgoing one are going away, just like that. Finally, after directives, after functions, we're going to take a look at one thing that's probably going to bite you, which is arguments. Of course, when it's finished, then there's some more. Arguments, you might already have run into this one. The escape parameter must be provided as its default value will change. Woohoo! Who's writing CSV files? Okay, three guys. So you're probably going to learn this one pretty fast. There is a nice function, fputCSV, which allows you to write directly an array into a CSV format. Nice PHP to give us the templating for that. And then you realize that you have 4 extra parameters to use as options. And one of them is a problem, which is the escape one. And in terms of specifications, CSV, do not specify any escape character, meaning that depending on the receiving end of the CSV, they will decide that they can process it or not. Meaning that PHP now has to guess which one of the receiving end it will be sent to, so that they can decide which is the default value. That never happens. And it generates a lot of bug reports on php.net saying, hey, look, this is not working because I generate a CSV and no one can read it. It's not no one, it's just, whoever you're talking to. So this is an evolution here that is based on the load of work that the PHP Foundation gets. Interesting, right? Someone has already answered several of these emails. So here the evolution is that the default value will go away. Well, you know the default value. If it's currently not a problem for you, well, just reuse it yourself and use the 5th argument, the one that calls escape, and give it the default value that we have at the moment. You're going to be safe. It works now. It's going to work when the parameter does not have any default value. And this is where name parameters come to the rescue, because you don't have to put all the default values yourself. You can leave it at that and then just give it the name escape. On top of that, that should be the last one. So all good. And you are free to go. Simple enough? Fair. But I was not prepared to have a feature evolution because of too much support email. Let's switch gears. Something else. Something that's slightly different. Evolution, modernization of the code. Online optional parameters must be the last ones. And this is, again, a very sneaky one. I don't know if you've run into that recently, but PHP, of course, allows default parameters and others that do not have. The recommendation is to put the ones that are compulsory at the beginning of the method, the signature, and the ones that are not compulsory at the end. So that if you put 3 out of 8 arguments, well, PHP will assign them initially when they are needed, when they are compulsory. And then when it reaches the one that is not there anymore, well, goes to default. Except that when we write code organically, we don't have the opportunity to do that all the time, right? What happens is that we add some of them, we may have some default value, but the next one, we usually add them at the end of the list. Which means that you may end up writing things like that, where some of the default values are earlier and some of them in the end, and in between, you've got compulsory values. When it's sneaky, it's because if you're clever enough, you could actually live with that and never ever get an error message. Because as long as you provide enough parameters, positional arguments, until you've filled all the compulsory arguments, then it's good. But if someone suddenly removes one of them, boom, you've got an error. And again, name parameters are going to save the day. You just give the name of the compulsory argument that will fill, and PHP will not provide you with any bad feedback. Because on top of that, of course, you're not going to be able to change the signature unless every user is following you and also change the signature. So that might be difficult. Hold on. Does removing a default value somewhere in the middle of the signature remind you something? Feels like we've seen that. Oh yeah, that was 2 slides before. That's when PHP decided that out of all the 4 different values there, it's going to remove this one. I suppose this is PHP folklore, right? Do as I do, do as I say, don't do as I do. So we're going to have a laugh with that. Probably a few people without a clue will also have a laugh with that. What are the alternatives here if we want to get rid of that default value? Suggestion would be, hey, we can move that escape parameter 2 arguments, 2 position above, make it compulsory, right? You see, even the foundation is supporting me. Thank you. I didn't think you would be sarcastic. Of course, that's not possible. We're going to turn that into a change behavior, so that's going to break everyone's code. And then again, we're going to break that again when we drop the default. So at that point, I don't think there's anything that is really reasonable with that, except maybe using SPL. So you could do the wall change into SPL. There's a SPL file that is a method for that. Anyway, it's not good, and it's also going to span another 2 or 3 times our lifespan. So at that point, I guess it's more like rip the band-aid and yell once. So yeah, PHP going to get rid of that. Okay, but also we can have a good laugh. Now that's just between us and probably everyone on internet, but that's fine. Easy enough? Next. We're going to switch from syntax to data, something that probably you're going to have to fight quite a bit. Arrays are now typed for their keys. So you can put whatever you want in the value, that's still fine. Here, this is only integers and strings. Meaning that if you try to show a float there, PHP is not going to be happy, and to keep it running, it's going to turn that into an int. Now, I never thought about that, but the turning into an int is done the easiest way. Just drop the decimal part. No rounding, no fancy, hey, it's above 0.5, or it's below 0.5, or it's an imaginary. No, just get rid of it. So you might have a bunch of surprises between the data you inject in that key and the one you actually ended up manipulating. Very difficult to spot, because usually this is data, and unless you do, is it a string, is it a float, and that's going to take a while to discover. The best you can do is go with casting. At least you know what's happening. The casting, the way it's going to transform the element. The other one that could be interesting is that the floats can be turned into a string, and then later you can extract them without losing too much value. And I'm going to say, because most of the time it works. On the examples I have here, that would work. If you've got something that has a long number with just out of a division by 7, you're going to lose a little bit of precision anyway. So this one works to a certain extent. Otherwise, literally cast the element to make sure that at least you control the element the way you want them to be processed. Okay. The other question is the one I've asked you earlier at the beginning of the session. What would be a best way to handle this situation? So far, it's just a deprecation, just a warning message that's going to fill your logs. Could we turn that into a fatal error just to make sure that everyone checks the data before they manipulate them? Or is it a bit harsh? Can we do something else? I don't know. Suggestions are open. I'll relay them to whoever wants to update that. This one is going to be great because no one is going to be affected, right? Who's using this ugly old PHP syntax? Dollar, curly braces, and expression in between. Yes. Yeah. Was. That's the important word in what you just said. Or this one. Okay, so as I told you, error messages, deprecations are not going to bite you as long as you don't use those pretty much unknown PHP syntax. But then, can you spot the error in this code? There's only one line that is wrong. If you do not find it, I'm going to explain all of them. So better be active, right? No, not you again. Second one. Oh no, this is a PHP 8.3 constant. Okay, so it's the constant in the class A, and in between the brackets is the name. But since this is another global constant, then it will actually look for the value of the constant and look the name of the constant into the class. So if you're using something before 8.3, then you're good. This is wrong. But we're about to have 8.5, so I'm not going to consider that a good answer. Yeah, why? Which of the opening curly? This one? Yeah, this is the curly braces. This one is wrong. All the others are variation. So curly braces, this part in particular is going to be an array access with the curly braces instead of the square brackets. And this is completely forbidden since PHP 8.3. We'll see that back a bit later. Anyway, moving on, passing null to parameter. You're going also to find that data-related problem. Check your values before you call PHP native functions, because the more it goes, the more it checks that null is not used where a string has been needed. In this case, string strlen of null should be 0, but nowadays it's going to yield a deprecation. How do you do that? How you protect against that? If there is a possibility it's not a string, well, you can test the type itself, or you can directly use the null curls. And please do not use this one, right? Because in the end, this is, yeah, if it's null, then just use the default null value. It kind of works when you consider objects, like, yeah, you got something empty and then you make it a null, so at least you can deal with that. This is pretty much a glorified arrowbas, a commercial A element, except it's a bit faster. So that's the only advantage I find. The no scream operator, the arrowbas, which, by the way, you can stack, so you can very funnily put like lots of them one next to each other. This one actually waits for the error to be generated, then goes up the managers, and then say, oh yeah, it has to be shut down, so it hides it. So it's pretty slower than this one, which says, hey, if it's null, let me grab the default value, and PHP just does, yeah, if it's null, then it's null. So it's just a bit faster. But anyway, check that. And also, again, like we did before, we've got 2 other candidates for update. At the moment, it's not deprecated. How long is supposed to be false? Is it 0 at the moment? That's the case. True is 1. I get the feeling that at some point someone will say, hold on, Booleans, they don't have a size. So we'll just remove that. At the moment, it's not deprecated. Be safe with that. Just maybe you can also put another test. Is it a Boolean? And then do something more clever with it. Then, evolution, this one is in the parameters that are passed to mbconvert. So if you remember what's mbstring, mbstring is the library that's made to actually convert from one encoding to another. So if you're writing Chinese and you want to turn that into Central America Aztec, MB string is going to do that. Everyone does that every day. But on the other hand, things like you want base 64, which is used mostly for emails when you want to make that break down the attachments. It's not exactly MB string that's supposed to do that. Okay. So there, 4 of them has been removed. In particular, base 64 is not going to be supported by MB string anymore, which will stay on the encoding part. But we already have base 64 encode and base 64 decode. Okay, so when you're using that in the configuration or in the function here, just replace that with the actual native PHP. And you can do the same with uencode, except that welcome in the world of PHP because it's not encode and decode, it's convert. And it's also prefixed rather than suffixed. So that's where you see how much the age of PHP is there because the name is really wrong. If you want to do the same for HTML, that happens a bit more often. There is HTML special car that will do the work. If you want to use the 7-bit, this is an old conversion for emails again, that would see during transmission the 8th bit of UTF-8 to be shut down. So that's not even used anymore. And finally, if you want to convert to UTF-8, you use UTF-8 encode. Thank you, someone who's listening to me. Yes, this one stays, okay? So this one, don't use it, that's the contrary. Don't listen to everything I say. But that's going to clean the API and make it a bit more obvious which one to use. Okay? Good, thank you very much. Last time people were not paying enough attention. Another one that's going to be difficult, and this one actually has a lot of volume and you probably are going to be impacted, is the creation of dynamic properties. You define a class, and then at some point you need one, so you just create an extra property, and PHP will say, yeah, no problem, it's fine, I get some place and I store the value. Which leads to 2 different interesting problems. You can literally create something there and forget about it because that's a typo in the name of the property. So you store the right value in the wrong place, and later you wonder, hey, why the hell is this not changing while I actually store it at the right place? By default also, this added property has absolutely no options. No type, you can shove anything you want. There's no visibility, no property hook for that matter, or things like that. So it's really the least amount of effort that's possible. The other things I find funny is that you can actually put that anywhere, including, here this is an example, on a native PHP function. Unless you find a property that is private in that class and not advertised because it's private, and then PHP will yell that you should not redefine it. Anyway, that's fun. Don't do that anyway. This means that if you're clever enough, you can find something in the code, add an extra variable on it, let's say the database connection, and then wait, like the fish, on those sharks, that's just hook on and wait for the object to be used somewhere else in the code, and then access again the same property and say, yeah, it's there. It's a bit like doing globals, but with a little bit of an OOP touch. No, don't do that. So yes, that's one of them. One of the, here I mentioned the impact. In particular, this is probably the best because at that point, static analysis will be able to know, hey, look, you're trying to do something that does not exist, and that's going to be a lot easier to spot in the code. Also, if you want to tackle that problem in particular, there are 3 options to do it. First one, probably one of the easiest, there is an attribute. It's a long name attribute, but that's going to save your code. It's allow dynamic properties, and it will revert to the old behavior. You can still keep your code running, just take the advantage to clean it as much as you can. The other one is that you can extend std class. By default, you don't need the attribute. It will be automatically something where you can create properties as you need. Again, it's now going to be explicit that you want to be able to, do a lot of creation. The last one is going to be difficult, but you can use it with the magic methods. And of course, that's going to be called when the property is not defined. So you're going to be warned that someone is trying to access something that does not exist. I've even seen some code base which created a specific trait that defined those two and that immediately yells when it's being used to make sure that those extra properties are not called. Nowadays, obviously, PHP is going to do the cleaning for us. So probably is going to be the end of this trait, but that might also be an option if you have a really old code base. Now, the main advantage of that is the amount of memory you're going to save. And here you've got, well, 5 ways to store the same amount of data. You imagine a data set where you have properties and then some values. If you store them as standard class or associative array, you're going to fit 3 to 4 times less objects in the same amount of memory. As soon as you use even anonymous class or extended std class, you're going to have a lot more objects inside the same amount of memory. That plus all the static analysis elements that tells you that you're misusing your object. This has been also the case in terms of evolution from PHP. So on actual classes, you can see the evolution. If you had classes and you use them in 5.6, you probably could fit 5 times less objects in the same amount of memory. And of course, less memory means less resources on your server, probably going to run a bit faster. In terms of speed, it's a bit better, probably because there's less manipulation of memory, less copy and stuff like that. It's not, don't do it for the speed. It's there, but it's probably not going to be exceedingly better. I would say something like 10% better. But again, you need a lot of objects and a lot of arrays to actually gain anything. Finally, to finish on a light note, things that are a bit bizarre, that are still there, and that are going away. This is a good bug. You didn't know it, but you've typed your argument as nullable. If you use an argument and you give it a default value of null, PHP say, yeah, fine, I understand. I'm going to accept null as a value. So this is actually a nullable string as an argument that could be passed. You can see them here. Both of them are OK. The type still applies. If you try to shove an array inside that, doesn't work. But null, even though it's not explicitly written, is there. The fix is pretty simple. I mean, at least the easy fix is just add nullable, so at least it's explicit. I always make you consider that, is it worth keeping the null? Sometimes it acts as a default value or as a catch-all. So maybe it's valuable, but consider that. At least it's usually one of the two. Either make it nullable or drop the default value. Okay? Automatic vivification of false, which basically is the contrary of the other one. I don't know who invented that word. Definitely not in the dictionary, but this is a case where if you have a value where false in a value and you use it after that as an array, PHP goes on fine, no problem. If it's a false Boolean, you can use it as an array, and then after that it's an array. It's not false anymore. Obviously, it came from the time where you could call a function, and in case of error, it might not return an array as expected, but it might turn a false. Think explode, okay? Most of the time it returns an array, and you're used to have an array coming back. Once in a while it works, doesn't work, return false, and since you do not check anything, you want the code to keep running, so let's still use it as an array. Nowadays you're going to get a deprecation. It's still a bit the reverse of what we had before, right? Which was that null is not going to be accepted. Here, false is accepted. Null keeps its behavior. You can still get a null and use it as an array. PHP is not complaining yet. Again, I expect that to be happening up later. The other one is that Boolean false can be turned into an array. Boolean true is a fatal error. Again, you know, unbalanced behaviors. But again, don't try that at home. Underscore as a class name. Who's using underscore as a class name? No one. Thank you. We checked. So that's good. That's nice. Something that's deprecated. Hopefully no one is going to be beaten for that. It's supposed to be ready for future. We'll have in PHP 9 probably pattern matching, and that will require underscore to have a specific, you know, wildcard value. So it's better if it's not there. Just for a reminder, you can still define a global constant called underscore, and you cannot define a global function called underscore because there's already and there's a function called underscore because it's used for translating one string into another. And since you're going to use that so often, then yeah, it was made as short as possible and as inobtrusive as possible. Anyway, if you didn't think about that, this is actually PHP valid code, at least for the moment. I have no idea what it is. It's all custom code. Another one that's a bit weird, and I actually still don't understand why it's there, but you know, live with that. PHP now requires the comparison function when you're doing a custom sort to return an integer and not a Boolean as we were used to. Okay, so it kind of makes sense. Usually, that's what you want to use. You compare everything into the array. The closure gets two values, and you compare one with the other. Boolean should be sufficient. Okay, I guess that there is a cabal trying to push the spaceship operator into more usage, so they are now requiring ints. I give a try on performance, doesn't really help. I would expect then, if you have three values, that kind of spread the tree and should, kind of speed up the process. It's not the case. What is true, on the other hand, is that you should either stick to that, okay, live with the deprecation, go to the good one, but do not do halfway. Because if you keep the Boolean return type and you use the spaceship operator, you're going to get a surprising weird sort. Because PHP will actually turn +1 and -1 as true. Yeah. For PHP, 0 is a false, and anything else is true, including -1. So don't make sure you do not mix the two, because you're going to have a major surprise. And finally, something that hopefully no one of you ever tried, except me. You could use a semicolon instead of the column at the end of a case. And this is deprecated, so don't try that at home. But this used to be the case. You've learned, of course, to do a switch case, the value compared, and then it's supposed to be a column. And then you have your code right after it. It was also possible to use a semicolon. You could also, of course, use the column and the semicolon, just one empty instruction, nothing. You could also use the semicolon and then use the column after another value, and this works because, yeah, it's a label. So this is, if you don't use it, it's fine. I'm pretty sure you can't really jump into that one because it's inside another thing. So this is basically ignored. But this is horrible. This, of course, is just a lot of useless instruction, and I think the original problems comes from this one, which is that at the time where we liked to jump from PHP to outside PHP, then you could actually do something like that. And actually, if you run this piece of code, it will end up on the case number 4, and it will output the A value. And at that point, this acts as an understated end of instruction, because obviously PHP is going to stop everything else. Who has used that? Because I spent at least 2 evenings fixing that on my static analyzer. So if I catch the guy who did that, that's going to have a long discussion. Nah, this one is boring. We're going to finish on this one. As mentioned as an operator update. Did you know that you could upgrade update increment strings? That's one of the most beloved PHP Easter egg. If you get a Y, you do a plus on it, you get a Z. If you get a Z, you do another plus, you get AA. It kind of, carry on there. If you do minus, you get 0 because, it's a string, so who cares, right? And there's a huge number of weird behaviors because sometimes those strings can turn into numbers as long as they look like a float. Anyway, so this particular behavior, straight on the strings, yeah, it's over, it's finished. The good thing is that PHP gives us time to adapt to that. And we now have 2 functions, string increment and string decrement. So while you can't do that, you can use string decrement and reduce your string from 1. Also, if you don't use it on letter, like again, you want to use that on Chinese characters or on punctuation, if it's more accessible on your screen, on your keyboard, then it just does nothing. It's not, you can't upgrade those non-letters. Finally, this one, we already mentioned it. I just wanted to keep it as an history lesson. It evolved a lot, but in 7.3, that was valid, running as expected. Am I out? Yeah, I'm finishing. 7.4, it started as a deprecation for 1 version. In 8, we actually got a fatal error and a nice message. Ooh, don't do that, I spotted you. And in the last time, then it's actually turned into a parse error. 8.5, it's going to be the same. So you see, this is another way of things evolving across PHP versions. So let's finish. Lots and lots of deprecations. I don't know if you got bitten or you expect them in your code at the moment. A few of them should be somewhere on your map, right? So be careful, lots of them. You've seen different behaviors that should help you also prepare for that. The PHP group is doing a lot of effort to make sure that there is an alternative. Okay, you're going to rewrite some code, but there is a new function to replace it. There is a new behavior. You are directed into doing something a little bit better. You still have to write a bit, but it's better than before, than when we didn't get any warning between 7.4 and 8 about comparison possibilities with 0 and stuff like that. So documentation, read blogs, and if you can, run your code on the next versions. The deprecation you fix from the next versions on your current version is better. Finally, main question, we've got a new deprecated attribute. What will happen when we want to deprecate that? Hopefully that won't happen. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening and see you next time.